I thought I'd do a little bit of a rant about my journey because I do believe that we, as humans, tend to learn from others who have walked the path before us. Example, if I was trying to train for Colorado and hitting 14,000 feet, I would train as best as I can and also take the advice or emulate the training process that others have before me have done. You would think that it would facilitate or hack shortcuts to getting to that altitude or that summit, but you know, I don't, even if it's wishy-washy and not data driven, I think that just having somebody that you commune with that shares the same goal just empowers you to reach the goal. So in this time of division and political strife and hatred, and I think that we have found our communities. We've found other people that commiserate with us, and there's a positive to that, because I think that when you have a common thread, it gives you reassurance and it empowers you to continue on. There's a downside to it too, in the case where we're politically driven with the times. I think there is a lot of anger, and when you find your direction but it's layered atop of stress response, then I think that the stress response brings out its own form of energy. And the problem is that you will go in that direction, but the stress response also cuts off. By default, stress response is a instinctual reaction, so it also cuts off upper executive thinking, problem solving. So I think you learn to drum up energy, and for those of us that are just exhausted, that might be a dopamine response, but if you only stay there with that energy, you won't think in a contextual way to find the next step. I mean, we all have to have a purpose in life. Hey, listen, I'm at the Morton Arboretum, and I think I did this walk about 6 years ago, and I filmed a video here. I forget. It was for somebody that was in the ICU, and I just dropped off my son, and I thought, you know what, I gotta go back there. And I passed this spot, and I thought, I gotta repeat something. So, not repeat it, but show you, and I'll put the link down below for my old one, but show you where I have evolved. So the reason I'm thinking about this is because I feel a bit of suffering. You know, when you have the idea of having a regular paycheck, having a swath of, not a swath, but having a big institution support you, supposedly, it empowers you to a sense of purpose, kind of. But the problem is, a sense of purpose is ceilinged, because once you have been patted on the back and you're given the thumbs up that what you're doing is useful for the community and what you're doing is necessary, then you try to take that the next step. I'm going to go this way. But you find that what you're doing for the community is great, but keep it hush. and do what you can do, but here's your boundaries. And I think that to a certain degree that's useful, just like that stress response is useful for people who are just fatigued, underslept, exhausted from suffering. But then it keeps you in that space. it certainly gives you a bump up from where you were, but it really puts a ceiling on where you can go from there. And I don't think that's fair. So obviously I'm talking about being a hired gun, an employed doctor, and wouldn't have realized it if I didn't step away. But stepping away has opened up this pervasive idea that there's something else that was there before that I wasn't able to touch upon because I was being limited. And this is not a blaming thing, this is just a revelation thing for me. And I think if I get it out, somebody there, whoever's watching, might also find better foothold to continue forward or get past their own ceilings. So the stress response is useful, but cognitive thinking, problem solving, introspection is what we need. And sometimes if you don't have a purpose in life that you have at least entertained, or a vision, I guess, then you will be stuck in that stress response type of dopamine response, large crowd gathering, especially with social networking and online presence is just so pervasive now. And again, it's enticing because you have people that are on the other end with the social groups or the online presence designing algorithms to keep you engaged. That's what their job is to give you a dopamine response. And that dopamine response is an energy burst, which is cool. But if you don't have a way to unplug or a sense of limitations, I'm only going to be on social media for an hour, or I'm not going to recharge my phone in my bedroom. I'm keeping screens off. If you don't have a sense of that, then it will be over enticing to just continue with dopamine response after dopamine response after dopamine response, kind of like drugs. So that is the problem with drugs. It's a shortcut way to stimulate the brain. And when you stimulate the brain and it gets this high amount of dopamine, it's going to feel good, which is probably what you need. I mean, but it'll also drop you down, and the brain's going to say, well, I want that again, give it to me. And if you don't have a sense of purpose, you don't have basic way to disconnect and ground, like in nature, then you'll be addicted to that taste of dopamine forever. And you'll be in a place that's better than before, but it's kind of like a different prison. So I would always implore my folks to say, it is useful to be in communion with other people. I think it serves you to know that you're not alone, and loneliness is defeating. But sometimes when you have others along the same path, then it gives you the sense that you're in the right direction. But what I wanted to explain is that sometimes you don't really need to have a desired or a well-executed direction. Sometimes it's just a matter of having others support you. Loneliness is always a tough thing to encounter. As humans, being with a herd is what we're supposed to do. So when you're solo, which is what I was thinking I was, the only integrative medicine practitioner around, well, there's two others that were kind of in the area, my mentor and another person, and they're both cool, but I think they felt the same thing, isolation. So it's a little bit defeating if you don't have a sense of purpose. The bottom line is that with a community, you will have an uplifting drive. And what I'm getting at is, if you don't have a community, then seek out a coach to take you to 14,000 feet. Because even if the coach gives you some bullshit way to get there, not that it's intentional, but if it's not based in data and doesn't make sense, just the fact that you have somebody who has your back, who will give you this power and energy level that will take you to that place where you were not before. So what I do as a coach is that I try to give guidance to people to see that there's a successful way to get past their suffering. Listen, I think the most successful people out there are the ones that have encountered some form of suffering. It's a shame, but I think that when you hit rock bottom, and I'm not saying I've hit rock bottom, I think there are other people that are suffering more than I, but when you hit rock bottom, it makes you think, makes you accept a different viewpoint. And if you can have somebody show you that, it doesn't mean that you'll believe it or you'll adopt it, but sometimes when you feel it, there's no other choice. I like Tony Robbins' idea about, he has this saying that if you want to take the island, burn the boats. Makes sense because you have no recourse. You have to go forward. And sometimes with suffering, you'll actually have to problem solve your way out of the crap. So I think it does serve to suffer. But at the same time, I'm going to go over here where there's a waterfall. At the same time, you have to pace yourself because it can get you to the point of a debilitating condition. So again, if you don't pace yourself, it can be demoralizing. You can get sick. So you have to be careful. I'm going to go down here and show you this waterfall. Oh, there's a family playing. So I also did a video here a long time ago. This is Lake Marmo, I think. So it's not that active, but not to divert from our initial thought, but here it is. So usually it's a little bit healthier, more robust, but for now, it's nice to hear water. It's also nice to be in nature too. So I think that removing yourself from stress response sometimes gets you better cognitive thinking, introspection, like I was getting to. So suffering sometimes is an element that will push you forward. And if you want to avoid this suffering, then I think that living with the assistance or the relationship of somebody who you want to emulate, again, it's not a hack, but it invigorates a person with a little bit of energy to pursue and do the best that they can. So you don't necessarily, so for example, my role as a coach is to problem solve where a person is and tell them how others have gotten to a place outside that problem. It might be self-evident for people who aren't in the pit, is what I call it, but sometimes when you're in there and you are fully stress response, you can't see the ladder that's next to you. So if you're constantly thinking, stress response, I'm going to die, this is painful, I can't sleep, it doesn't allow you that problem-solving technique. So when you're with somebody else who has maybe emulated or done it, then it uplifts the person to say, you know what, calm down that stress response and let's just think this out. So my job as a coach, honestly, is to be that person. Hate to say it, but some of the suffering that I went through when I was a kid, and we all go through it, different degrees, or some of us just don't realize it, and you will go through it eventually, whether it's your own journey or it's the loss of a loved one, loss of a job, whatever it is. I think that once we realize that other people might have been there before, it becomes empowering to say, I will continue steps forward. So that's kind of, I'd say 70% of the successes that I see in the clinic, my warriors, and those are folks who have conquered a short journey or a big journey. They've conquered cholesterol, they've conquered a stroke, they've come back from cancer, they've taken care of their fibromyalgia, they're controlling their anxiety, whatever it is. Even if I don't suggest anything that's smart, it's just the fact that I'm there and I'm telling them, hey, listen, there's another way out. And that's the short-sightedness of medicine. Western medicine is, because of malpractice, we're supposed to say, you know what? You have a terminal cancer. These are your months. Get your affairs in order. And that's an extreme presentation, but that's the typical example. And same thing can go with those smaller things. This is fibromyalgia. You benefit from this medicine because it's the only thing out there. Or you have Crohn's disease. You will probably have to have no further gluten, and we'll probably have to cut out your colon, but you'll be okay. And I just think that with what we're taught in medical school and what we know as far as pharmacy, it puts a ceiling on success. And I think that this body, I've always referred to this miracle that's in each and every one of us, I think it has miracle potential. So on my website, Herbal 411, I put down the answer is in everybody. It just takes asking the right questions to show you the direction out of the suffering. Now I extend that a little bit, but so I really believe, even till now, I believe that it's important to have stability. And if you don't have your own stability, get somebody around you that's anchored. And with internet, especially with COVID, one of the beauties is that we can reach. I've talked to people on several different continents, and it's kind of cool. And some of them are doing pretty well. So, and I didn't do anything except for just giving them a framework to talk. And this is not just talk session and positive psychology. I think there's more to it than that. But I think so I don't want to poo-poo psychology, but I think that when you're beat down and just tired, having somebody else be a shining light for you that's refreshed will give you an upsurge of activity and energy and dopamine too. So even if it's just one night of saying, you know what, I'm going to beat this crap, and you get a good night's sleep, that's without even one single medicine. So I think there's value to it, that the data is a little bit lacking on it, so my colleagues just don't embrace it. So I'd say bottom line is that 70% of the time when people sign my warrior board because of the successes that they establish, it's usually because I didn't do a thing. I didn't give them a medicine. I didn't send them to a surgeon. I just told them, you know what, with what you just shared with me, I think we can beat this, or I think we can change the course. And sometimes if you're just given a map on how to change the course, man, most people are just hungry for that. And they'll claw their way out of the pit. So for someone who's exhausted to garnish that kind of energy out of nowhere and claw their way out of the pit, whether they beat their disease or not, that's a miracle to me. Now, certainly breath exercise, mindful practice, vitamin deficiency fixing, helping mitochondria, using cannabis to garnish more sleep, all that stuff does help, but I would say it's about 30% effective. 70% is up to the individual. So I'm not saying that there's anything magical about this, but I think that if you have a good practice, that you should be able to beat the circumstances that got you to find my video. Hopefully you're doing okay. But if you align yourself with other people that don't constantly give you bad news, I think you'll have better success. And I guess to PS this, being around people who constantly tell you, and I'm not saying get rid of or divorce your doctors, I think there's value, but being around people who constantly tell you that you're going to die, or it's not worth it to invest in breath therapy, bullshit. So don't, if it doesn't align with you, stop hanging out with those people. And there's a lot of doctors, there's a lot of people and friends that you can come up with in your community. Check your resources, check your community centers, check your local temples, churches, friends, even from afar. You can get to Facebook friends or relatives. Reach out. They'd be probably happy to hear about you and know that you're trusting them. So there's always something available, but if you're surrounded by pessimism, the only way to get, it's either pessimism or optimism. It's either stress response or relaxation, rebuild response. So the only way to get yourself healing is, and optimistic, is to have those kind of people support you. So don't give up. Know that there's better ways to go through life. There's always a better trail, a better view, and just seek it out. But know that you're not alone. And reach out to me. I can give you people in your area, perhaps, or give you my success story. And hopefully this helps. If you have anybody else that's suffering, share this with them. Otherwise, I'll see you at the next video.